Imagine you're riding in a taxi in Indonesia. You're just sitting in the back seat, watching that chaotic, vibrant Jakarta traffic crawl by outside your window.
Right, a totally normal afternoon.
Exactly. And the driver has the radio on, and it's playing this incredibly smooth, catchy, jazzy love song. It's got this sultry saxophone, a really soft, vocal, gentle rhythm, just the perfect background track for like a romantic dinner.
Oh yeah, real smooth jazz vibes.
Yeah, but it just keeps looping. I mean, 10 minutes go by, then 20 minutes, 40 minutes straight, the driver's just bumping this exact same sweet romantic jazz tune.
Which is a little intense for a taxi ride.
Right. You might think he is just really going through a breakup or, deeply in love. But what you were actually listening to is a weaponized AI-generated political protest against a really powerful government minister.
It's wild. It completely camouflages its intent. Because, on the surface, it is pure romance. But beneath that jazz melody is this act of fierce collective rebellion from a public that feels pushed to the absolute brink.
So today on this deep dive, we are looking at a phenomenon that completely took over the internet. It's a viral Indonesian meme song called My Little Bulu Kitan, which translates to My Little Sticky Rice Cake.
Such a great title.
It really is. And our sources today paint this fascinating picture of how a single, seemingly trivial remark about turning off a stove sparked a nationwide uproar. We're unpacking how everyday citizens are hijacking algorithms and AI to voice their dissent. And what this whole bizarre saga reveals about that fine line between digital resistance and just pure entertainment.
Before we jump into the mechanics of all this, just a quick note for you listening. We are exploring some politically sensitive territory today, specifically involving controversies around Indonesian government policies, economic crises, and highly placed officials.
Right, it gets pretty heavy.
Yeah, so we want to be perfectly clear that we are simply unpacking the social dynamics and the events reported in our sources. We're not taking any political sides here. We're purely examining the fascinating ways a society reacts when it feels, economically and legally squeezed.
Absolutely. So to understand why millions of people were losing their minds over a song about sticky rice cakes, we have to look at the environment that birthed it. It was incredibly tense. I mean, take us back to the global powder keg of early 2026.
Yeah, so February of that year brought a massive geopolitical shock. You had the outbreak of a war between the U.S. and Iran, which led directly to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz.
Which is a massive bottleneck for global oil.
Huge. And for a nation like Indonesia, which relies heavily on energy imports just to keep its economy functioning, the ripple effects were immediate. And they were devastating. Global energy prices skyrocketed.
Like overnight almost.
Pretty much. Within a matter of weeks, this palpable panic over potential gas and oil shortages began sweeping across the entire archipelago. People were watching their daily cost of living surge in real time.
And the government budget was already stretched super thin, right, because of President Prabowo's flagship initiative.
Right, the Free Nutritious Meals Program, or the MBG.
Exactly. That program was absorbing a massive chunk of national resources. So people were terrified that the government simply wouldn't be able to afford to keep subsidizing household fuel.
And that anxiety crystallized in April 2026 around a very specific everyday item, the Tabung gas melon.
The little green cylinders.
Yeah, the 3-kilogram subsidized household liquid petroleum gas cylinders. They are painted green, hence the nickname melon. And, these cylinders are the absolute lifeline for ordinary Indonesians.
Because everyone uses them.
Everyone. Street food vendors rely on them to cook nasi goreng. Millions of working-class families need them literally just to boil water and cook their daily meals.
So right in the middle of this panic, the government decides to roll out a new regulation. Suddenly, citizens were required to register their national ID numbers to verify they were actually eligible to buy these subsidized green cylinders.
Which, on paper, from a bureaucratic standpoint in some air-conditioned boardroom, that probably sounds like a simple data entry update.
Right, just type in your number. But on the ground, it triggered widespread panic because it completely ignored the reality of Indonesia's digital divide.
Precisely. You are asking a rural grandmother or a day laborer who maybe has never used a smartphone for anything other than basic calls to suddenly navigate a digital registration system just to secure the gas they need to cook dinner.
It's a massive hurdle, especially since these communities are already super vulnerable to digital scams. Asking them to surrender their national ID data to a system they don't really understand felt terrifying. It wasn't just like an inconvenience. It felt like a threat to their daily survival.
And stepping right into the center of this absolute powder keg is Bahlil Lahadalia.
Yes, the Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources.
Yeah.
And the chairman of Golkar, which is Indonesia's second largest political party. And I have to say, looking at the sources, his biography is incredible.
It really is. He wasn't born into the dominant Javanese political aristocracy at all.
No, he grew up in Maluku, completely outside the centers of power. The guy started out as a bus driver. He was an insurance salesman. He clawed his way up to build this massive empire in property and mining before ever entering politics.
He represents that quintessential grassroots to elite narrative. He's a self-made tycoon who fundamentally should understand what it means to be working class in Indonesia.
Which is exactly what makes his behavior during this crisis so baffling to me. He has the ultimate underdog story. He should be the champion of the street food vendors. But reading through these sources, his public handling of the green gas cylinder crisis makes him sound like, I don't know, a Silicon Valley tech billionaire.
Oh, totally.
Like a guy who started in a garage but is now sitting on a mega yacht, lecturing struggling families about skipping their morning coffee to balance their checkbooks.
That's a perfect analogy. And the betrayal of that underdog narrative is precisely what poured gasoline on the public's anxiety. In the middle of this nationwide panic, Bahlil delivered a series of spectacularly tone-deaf public remarks.
Including the infamous stove comment.
Yes, he actually told citizens, and I quote, "Once the food is cooked, don't waste the stove." He was literally instructing adult humans to turn off the fire when they were done cooking.
I mean, you can practically feel the collective insult. Millions of people who are stretching every single rupiah just to keep their families fed are being told by a mining tycoon to remember to turn the knob on their stove.
And he didn't stop there. He compounded the insult by accusing the very people complaining about the new ID policy of having ulterior motives.
Wait, he accused them of hoarding, right?
Yeah. Bahlil claimed that the citizens who are having trouble buying a single gas cylinder were usually the ones secretly buying 30 or 40 cylinders at a time to hoard them or resell them on the black market.
Wow. So he transforms from this grassroots success story into the absolute face of elite, out-of-touch privilege. It created this staggering sense of relative deprivation. The public is terrified they won't be able to feed their kids, and the energy minister is essentially calling them greedy hoarders who lack the common sense to turn off a burner.
It's infuriating. And usually when a government official triggers that level of profound, visceral anger, you expect a traditional backlash.
Right, people taking to the streets, holding signs, shutting down intersections outside Parliament.
Exactly. But instead, this profound national frustration bypassed the streets entirely, and it birthed My Little Blue Kitten.
Which is just amazing. The anatomy of this viral protest anthem is fascinating because it is a masterpiece of absolute zero-effort internet culture.
Truly low-effort brilliance.
Right. So this account called Vocalist Netizen created it without a single musician stepping into a studio. They simply scrolled through internet discussion boards, copied the most sarcastic, biting comments from angry citizens, and fed that raw text into an AI music generator.
They literally just copy-pasted the public's rage.
Yeah. And then they prompted the AI to create a smooth, romantic jazz melody and stitched that audio over random news footage of Bahlil.
It is a brilliant juxtaposition. You have this cold, soulless, cutting-edge AI technology being hijacked to express deeply localized, raw human anger. And the creator embedded specific cultural linguistics into the prompt that subverted traditional Indonesian romantic tropes.
Right, the whole Kanda and Dinda thing?
Exactly. So Kanda translates to a beloved older brother or a respected romantic male lead, while Dinda refers to a beloved younger woman or sweetheart.
So the AI song literally casts Bahlil as the romantic lead, the beloved Kanda, and the collective Indonesian public is framed as his Dinda.
It's so patronizing in the best possible way, and the absolute punchline of the song, the lyric that sent it into the stratosphere, translates to, "Ever since my beloved said to turn off the stove once the food is cooked, I decided to stop cooking for him."
Oh man, that single line does more work than a 1,000-word political essay.
It really does. It captures all of the public's fury about the policy failure, but it wraps that fury in a soft, tender, almost tragic, poetic tone.
And they didn't stop at poetry either. They layered the song with classic jokes, bapak bapak.
Oh, the dad joke.
Yeah, basically cheesy middle-aged dad jokes. One prominent lyric asks, "What fruit is the sweetest?" And the answer is Buahlil. It's this pun combining the Indonesian word for fruit, Buah, with Bahlil's name.
It sounds incredibly silly, I know, but the real-world saturation was undeniable. People were humming it while pushing carts through the supermarket.
Yeah, citizens were filming themselves in their kitchens, looking deadpan into the camera, declaring they had stopped cooking for their beloved minister. And of course, the taxi drivers were blasting it on 40-minute loops through Jakarta traffic.
And that saturation forces us to look at how a powerful political figure responds to being turned into an omnipresent joke. Bahlil's reaction is deeply revealing about the dynamics of modern power, because he employed what we can describe as a Tai Chi strategy.
Just absorbing the blow and redirecting the energy.
Precisely that, because if we look at his track record, he hasn't always been so accommodating. Back in October 2025, when youth groups affiliated with him noticed angry netizens making mocking memes, they filed formal legal complaints.
Right, they actually sued people.
Yeah, and in January 2026, when Bahlil was deep-faked into ballet dancing videos, there was clear friction. But when My Little Bulu Kitan dropped and just took over the country, he completely shifted his stance.
He leaned into it.
He really did. He told the press he was entirely used to being mocked. He claimed he had been laughed at since he was a poor kid in Maluku, and even joked that going massively viral online just proved he was a top-tier figure.
You know, I look at that and I have to wonder if he is playing 4D chess. Like, is this Tai Chi strategy a genius public relations move where he disarms the public's anger by laughing along with them? Or is it a symptom of a much more depressing systemic reality where politicians simply do not have to care because they know an internet meme poses absolutely zero threat to their actual structural power?
That is the big question. And to answer that, we have to examine why the Indonesian public is utilizing AI memes instead of marching in the streets in the first place.
Why not just protest normally?
Because the preference for digital sarcasm over physical protest is a survival strategy. The public is caught in a vice grip between two immense opposing pressures, culture on one side and the law on the other.
Okay, let's break that down. The cultural pressure revolves around this concept of rukun, right?
Right. Rukun is a fundamental operating system in Indonesian and particularly Javanese society. It places a supreme emphasis on maintaining social harmony and communal equilibrium.
So no rocking the boat.
Exactly. Direct confrontation, shouting in the street, or publicly insulting an elder or a leader is heavily discouraged. It's seen as crude, almost like a moral failure because it disrupts the peace.
So standing outside the Ministry of Energy screaming at Bahlil violates the very fabric of rukun. You are breaking the social harmony.
You are. And then on the other side, you have the legal pressure, specifically the UUITE, which is the Electronic Information and Transactions Law. This legislation heavily penalizes the direct defamation of public officials.
Right, so if a citizen posts an open letter on social media, maliciously attacking the minister's dignity, or explicitly accusing him of incompetence, they face severe legal consequences, like actual real jail time.
Yeah, that explains the October 2025 lawsuits. People who crossed the line from subtle mockery into direct insult got sued.
So the public is totally trapped. Rukun dictates that they must be polite and preserve harmony, while the UUITE dictates that they must stay quiet or go to prison. That creates an incredibly suffocating box for public outrage.
It really does. Which is why meme culture naturally becomes the ultimate gray zone and allows the public to vent their fury without technically violating either boundary.
Because it's a joke.
Right. It avoids direct confrontation, preserving a superficial sense of rukun, and it isn't easily prosecutable under the UUITE. I mean, a prosecutor would have an incredibly difficult time proving that a smooth jazz love song about a sticky rice cake and turning off a stove constitutes malicious defamation.
It operates entirely as a digital Trojan horse. The social media algorithms on TikTok or Spotify, they don't understand political subtext. The algorithm just sees a catchy jazz tune that is generating massive engagement, getting shared, being looped by taxi drivers.
Exactly. The algorithm just says, people love this, push it to more feeds.
Yeah. But packed inside that algorithmic delivery system is this payload of fierce political dissent hiding in plain sight.
And because citizens are squeezed by both culture and the law, they are forced to do what marginalized groups have done for centuries. Political anthropologist James C. Scott actually coined a term for this phenomenon in his work on the arts of resistance. He calls it the hidden transcript.
That's the idea that subordinate groups have two different faces, right?
Yes. Scott argues that people lacking power rarely speak their minds openly to those who hold it. So, in front of the authorities, they perform a public transcript, they act obedient, they follow the digital ID rules, they nod along.
But safely outside the gaze of power.
Right. Outside that gaze, they maintain a hidden transcript. This is where their true feelings live, expressed through sarcasm, folk songs, gossip, and jokes.
And these jokes aren't just people being apathetic or lazy about politics.
Far from it. Scott views these hidden transcripts as an ongoing, low-intensity ideological resistance. They have to remain disguised, like, in this case, masked as an AI-generated romantic jazz meme, because expressing that resistance openly carries the threat of jail time or social ostracization.
So My Little Baloo Kitan is the ultimate algorithmically distributed hidden transcript. It allowed millions of isolated, anxious people to look at their phones and essentially nod at each other, acknowledging that the government's policy was absurd without ever having to officially declare war on the state.
Exactly. And from a certain angle, that digital Trojan horse scored a massive, tangible victory against the traditional political playbook because it completely dismantled the standard internet news cycle.
Which is usually so fast. Usually, a politician makes a spectacular gaffe like telling people to turn off their stoves during an energy crisis. The public gets furious for maybe 48 hours. Then a new scandal drops, a celebrity does something foolish, and everyone just moves on. The politician's quote fades quietly into the digital ether.
Right, the cycle resets.
But by weaponizing that quote into a catchy looping song, the creators etched Bahlil's gaffe into the permanent collective memory. It became impossible for his words to disappear. The song kept the criticism alive for weeks.
And it provided a profound sense of solidarity. I mean, imagine a mother in a rural village terrified about how she is going to afford her next green gas cylinder. She might feel incredibly isolated in her panic, but when she hears that song playing from a neighbor's phone or at the local market, she instantly realizes she's not alone. Millions of people share her exact reality.
And that solidarity feels like a massive triumph for everyday people. It really does. But I think we have to look at the pessimistic reality of James C. Scott's theory, too. Because the scoreboard at the end of this saga is fairly grim.
Yeah. Scott points out a tragic flaw in this kind of resistance. Safe resistance, the hidden transcripts, the jazz memes, the dad jokes, is frequently tolerated by those in power precisely because it poses absolutely no structural threat to the existing order.
The song went viral. The taxi drivers played it. Bahlil became the biggest punchline on the Indonesian internet. But Bahlil is still the Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources.
Yep.
He is still the chairman of Golkar. He is still the man sitting in an air-conditioned office dictating the policies regarding those subsidized gas cylinders. The jazz melody eventually fades from the trending charts, but the crushing economic policy remains exactly the same.
We are witnessing the dissipation of political anger. When public fury cannot be expressed directly through strikes or protests, that mutates. First, the raw anger about not being able to feed a family degrades into sarcasm. Then, that sarcasm is fed into an AI generator and processed into entertainment.
And finally, that entertainment becomes a viral TikTok hit.
Exactly. And with every single mutation, the raw kinetic energy that could have theoretically fueled an actual political movement is vented harmlessly into the digital void. It basically operates as a societal pressure release valve.
So Bahlil's Tai Chi strategy of laughing it off isn't just a clever PR move. It's a form of structural maintenance. He's letting the public sing their song and vent their pressure, knowing full well that tomorrow everyone has to go back to navigating the same broken system he controls.
It is deeply sobering, especially when you remember that Indonesian youth have actually attempted to challenge the system directly in the very recent past.
Right.
Just a year prior, in 2025, young people organized the hashtag Indonesia Lap or Dark Indonesia protests.
Oh, right. The One Piece flags.
Yes. Citizens took to raising the pirate flag from the anime One Piece instead of the national flag as a silent physical protest against government policies. They really tried to manifest their anger in the real world.
But the atmosphere of intimidation, like the threat of the ITE defamation laws we talked about, and the cultural weight of Rukun, it just crushed those direct actions. It squeezed all of that genuine physical activist energy out of the public square and forced it underground, where it basically had no choice but to take the shape of a jazzy AI meme just to survive.
Yeah. The phenomenal success of My Little Bulu Kitan is simultaneously a testament to incredible human resilience and a glaring marker of profound political loss. It highlights the absolute boundaries of what the state permits its citizens to say.
It really forces you to reevaluate our relationship with technology. I mean, we love to view the internet as this great democratizing force, right? A digital town square where anyone from a rural farmer to a Jakarta taxi driver can have a voice that reaches millions.
That's the dream we're sold.
But when the loudest, most unified, and most creative political expression in an entire nation is forced to reduce itself to a catchy love song about a gas cylinder just to avoid prosecution,
Yeah.
you have to ask yourself a hard question. Is the internet actually giving us a voice to challenge power? Or is it merely acting as a digital pressure release valve, a highly entertaining pacifier that keeps the powerful comfortably in charge, while we all just dance to the rhythm of the algorithm?
I mean, when political dissent becomes nothing more than a catchy tune you tap your foot to in the back of a taxi, it is very easy to forget that the meter is still running and you are not the one driving the car.
Wow. The image of that 40-minute loop hits completely differently now.
It really does.
Well, that is all the time we have for today's deep dive. If you want to explore the intricate nuances of this story further, the link to the full English source article can be found right down there in the description and show notes for further reading. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.